Good afternoon, everyone. We will get the meeting of Community Infrastructure Services underway. We have 4 consent items. Would someone like to move the consent items? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Gazzola, did you want to...
Question on the number 2.
Okay, we'll need a motion to take that one out of consent. Anybody else want to take any out? Okay, we'll deal with 1, 3, and 4 then. It's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. All in favor? Sorry, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So now we are dealing with number 2. Councillor Gazzola has asked to take that out of consent. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
No, I just have, in the ward that I represent, there's a Pine Grove Neighborhood Association. I don't see them included on this list. Is there a reason for that or an explanation?
Mr. May?
Through you, Madam Chair, this list was developed through staff, so I can't speak to the specifics, but certainly before council ratification, I can email Councillor Gazzola with the information.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The other question I had was wondering, are there any new organizations, any new associations on this list? Or are they the same as last year?
Through you, Madam Chair, not to my knowledge.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's been moved. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, our community engagement policy. And we have Janet here to give our 5-minute presentation.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today to present the proposed community engagement policy for your consideration. Unfortunately, my predecessor, Josh Joseph, is unable to be here, but I'd like to acknowledge and thank Josh for his efforts to work with me on this to ensure that all the feedback he heard through both internal and external consultation on this is reflected in the document that's before you today. So I'm going to do a quick recap of the body of work that has preceded this policy. We have a corporate strategic commitment to open government in our strategic plan, as well as an open government action plan. We have an approved community engagement framework, which provides 4 different levels or means of empowering citizens to get involved. We have an Engage Kitchener online platform that enables citizens to participate, and we have the work that was done last year through the Community Engagement Review. And through this review process, it was recommended that staff return to Council with a community engagement policy. An additional visualization that I'd like to provide for context is something that's called the engagement triangle. So often when we think about public engagement, we think about informing decisions or the visible tip of the iceberg here. But engagement is also about building capacity in the community and building relationships. So what's foundational to all of this is trust. Citizens need to have a clear understanding of the process, what their role is, and how staff will be responding to their participation and feedback. So the proposed community engagement policy is recommended to really support a long-term exercise in building trust in the community so that citizens want to get involved in the decisions and the work that we're doing. I'm going to walk you through some of the policy impacts now and discuss how that will impact both staff and the community. The proposed community engagement policy retains the 4 levels of the community engagement framework, but builds on this by providing staff with greater direction to help them decide when and how to engage the public. This is about ensuring efficient and effective use of staff time, and it's about a consistent service experience for members of the public. How this looks in action. Previously, staff had to evaluate on their own when to engage the public. There was strategic oversight from senior leadership, but senior leaders themselves did not have access to a policy that provided a consistent set of guidelines to ensure a consistent approach across the corporation. The proposed policy will now provide that coordinated oversight for staff. We recognize that the decision to engage is not always a black and white decision, so the more guidance that is available, the more consistent we can be. As well, previously, staff had to independently learn how to engage using their own methods. The community engagement policy provides much greater direction to staff on what's expected through the community engagement planning process and really builds on the collective learning of the organization. Another policy impact is emphasizing corporate coordination. This is about ensuring that we're timing our outreach to the public appropriately, that we are avoiding duplication, that staff can leverage each other's outreach opportunities to add additional questions or gain additional knowledge. For citizens, this means that we're going to try to avoid duplication and reduce engagement fatigue. So how this looks in action: previously staff worked independently when it came to doing community engagement. They could source their own tools, they could use their own tactics. Now through the community engagement policy, staff will be coordinating through the community engagement office and encouraged to leverage our platform of engaged subscribers, which really empowers citizens who are interested in getting involved to be notified of engagement opportunities. An additional policy impact is recognition that staff in this organization are subject to legislation from other levels of government regarding notification, but they're empowered through this policy to go above and beyond legislative requirements. This will ideally allow for greater participation, which allows staff to hear more comprehensive feedback. And for citizens, it means more meaningful engagement opportunities. And finally, the community engagement policy is stakeholder driven. And I think this is the most important part. It's really about ensuring that the policy or the work that we do puts the people in the community first. This is about making sure that our tactics and our outreach are designed to support participation and to hear from a variety of voices and hear a variety of perspectives in the community. How this looks in action: we will see engagement success previously had emphasized the total number of participants who got involved. And while it is important to have participation that's representative, we want to ensure that our engagement planning is tailoring our tactics to hear from a variety of people and ensure that people who don't typically get involved have an opportunity to come to the table and participate. We want to ensure that our outreach tactics addresses barriers that may exist in the community so that we can hear from a variety of people. This concludes my presentation, so I respectfully submit the proposed community engagement policy for your consideration and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Janet. We do have some questions. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. So in reviewing the policy, I have a couple of questions and one suggestion. So in the first part of the policy, and actually I probably should use the new report, but I had done a lot of notes on the old report from back in December. So the first page of the policy where it talks about the scope, and the provisions of this policy enable the city to exceed the minimum legislative requirements in appropriate circumstances. Who will be making that decision about the appropriate circumstances? I mean, I feel encouraged when I read the minimum legislative requirements, but I want to know what appropriate circumstances could be. What would that be?
Through the chair, the decision would then be made based on the following section of the policy, which outlines the oversight for this decision making. So staff would look to the impact of the work that they're doing, and they'd look at the suggestions for when we should be perhaps going above and beyond. So it is still a judgment call, but following the policy will hopefully provide staff with a better understanding of when it's appropriate to go above and beyond in their outreach.
Okay, because certainly there are certain situations that it's important, and I was glad to see that you talked about not just the number of people that attend, but the value of their comments or comments coming from other sources. Because quite often we know in neighborhood public meetings, one person may be attending but speaking for 4 or 5 neighbors, for example, right? And so how will we weigh that input?
Through the chair, the efforts will be made when designing a community engagement plan to identify what stakeholders are going to be impacted by the work that staff are doing. And then staff will be designing their outreach tactics to ensure that we can try to help people to participate. So that means recognizing the availability of people to attend public meetings. Is it better suited to an online forum? There may be instances where it is absolutely more important to go to people and have a face-to-face conversation. So all those decisions have to be made as part of designing the community engagement plan and ensuring that our tactics are designed to try to encourage that participation.
Okay, thanks. On 5.7 of the report, in the very top paragraph, it talks about, in the second sentence, it says, the community engagement may be required for city-led initiatives. Shouldn't that really be, should be required? Instead of may? I mean, may, again, leaves it very open and sort of loosey-goosey. I think there are many, many times we should be engaging with the community.
Through the chair, the concern is that by having any really hard and fast rules around when we go to the public, it may make it inappropriate at times to actually engage where there may not actually be time, the situation may be urgent, the public may not be able to participate in a meaningful way. So it's really challenging to come up with a set of hard and fast rules. So what we've tried to put in place is guidance to help staff to make those decisions and recognize that our corporate leadership team has final oversight over strategically important decisions that need to be made.
Okay, and I don't disagree with you on that point, Janet, but I also, one of the critical issues that happens quite often, and you said it yourself, sometimes it's urgent, but then the public sees that as being pushed through or rammed through, and I think the intent of a community engagement policy is to be very open and transparent with the community and say, we're trying to be very open, we want to hear what you have to say. That was a comment, sorry about that. I also have a question on what would be 5-9. I think that was where I had the question. Yeah. Where it says in trust, I wrote down here, be willing to compromise. Is that something, because I think where my thought was here, that the level of engagement is most appropriate where there's a high level of public interest, sufficient resources, and capacity to act within the community. That seems, again, fairly subjective to when we decide for public engagement. I'd like to see us use words, again, that are a bit more open and compromising. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe I'm going to key back in because I see my time is up. But at the appropriate time, I do want to forward this motion. I think there's some really good stuff in here, but I'd like to hear what the rest of and I want to have some more questions. Thanks.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. McDonald, I think this is definitely an improvement on what we already do, and it's my assessment that I think we engage in a fairly strong aspect of community feedback and engagement. So beyond that, one thing I've always thought that it may be slightly lacking is giving or enforcing upon those that participate that their opinions matter by keeping them involved through the process. So apart from just taking the feedback, once that progresses whatever the matter at hand may be, looping back in and keeping it in touch. This is where it's at right now. It's coming for approval. This ultimately was the decision that came. And I'm sure we take contact information for those that are willing to provide. Do we take that into consideration as it go forward?
Through the chair, the policy does include, reflect the importance of closing the loop. But as you mentioned, we are limited in our ability to communicate with people, providing that they have provided consent for us to follow up. But as a general rule of thumb, when we're designing community engagement plans right now, whatever channels we go through in order to communicate with citizens to get them involved, the rule of thumb is to go back through those same channels again to notify citizens of the results of the community engagement work and how it's reflected in the work of staff.
So I'm glad to hear that, and I got the essence from the report itself that does exist. And in summation, these things have constant iteration. It's a live document. It will continue to change. So I'm hopeful that we have a lot of mediums out there that do make it very easy to communicate to the masses. I hope that we try to put more focus and emphasis on closing the loop as much as retaining and receiving feedback as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Sealock. So I am a fan of this plan, this policy. Well done to the staff who worked on it. I just want to ask a couple questions. Do we foresee, as a result of the implementation of this policy, that we might have more substantial content in the sections of our staff reports that fall under the category of community engagement? Do you foresee that down the road we might have a bit more detail about that?
Through the chair, the format of the report reflects the community engagement framework, the 4 levels of citizen participation, and the community engagement policy retains that framework. So the overall structure is in place. I couldn't comment on changing the format or the expectations of council with respect to how much detail goes into that report. But I can take that feedback.
I mean every report. You know, most reports have financial implications, community engagement implications, and that's just a section on staff reports. So I was just curious if we might be looking ahead towards seeing more information about community engagement for each staff report. But anyway, just maybe that's more just a request that perhaps that is looked at as it's implemented to see what opportunities might be to share with council, highlights about how we've used our community engagement policy in practice. So I also want to know, will we continue to use Ping Street as a engagement tool?
Through the chair, our current engagement tool is provided by a company called Peak Democracy, which was recently bought out by OpenGov. We do have community engagement available and linked through Ping Street, so it's available to citizens that way. I'm not responsible for administration of Ping Street, so I couldn't comment on the future implementation from the perspective of social media staff. Our current platform is under a contract extension, and we will continue to deliver services using that platform for the near future.
Peak Democracy?
Correct.
Okay, and then, so the last question I have is just, do we intend to see more opportunities for residents to proactively go on the platform and check off what types of notifications they would like to receive going forward?
Through the chair, so the delivery of, or the arrangement with the vendor who provides this tool is actually through our regional working groups. So the City of Waterloo, Cambridge, and Region of Waterloo all use the same platform. And that working group has identified the ability to subscribe to topics as a priority that we would like to see implemented, so that citizens are empowered to decide for themselves what sort of areas of interest that they have and what kind of information they want to get. In that way as well, we're going to reduce any fatigue around communication, so I'm not blitzing everybody in our subscriber list with every single engagement initiative. So thank you for that feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, in your presentation, you reviewed a number of things that have changed, but there's been, is there any real major change of in in what we're approving here from where we've been at it for the past couple of years? Any real major changes?
Through the chair, the policy builds on the successes that we've had in community engagement and is recommended to provide more consistent experiences. And that's what we've heard through external work that was done to conduct the community engagement review, is that citizens weren't always having the same engagement experiences as they interacted with different parts of the corporation. So it's not a fundamental change in direction. This is building on the commitment that the corporation has already made to conduct community engagement and trying to ensure that we're doing so in a way that's efficient and effective.
Okay, looking forward, how do we know if this policy is a success? How do we know if it's doing what it should be doing? For example, I often I'm at meetings and people say, I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about that. So going forward now, how do we know if this new policy or revised policy is a success?
Through the chair, I think that we could look at that both in internal factors in terms of staff having access to resources and finding a community engagement planning process that's simplified. And in terms of the public, we would be looking at participation, awareness of our community engagement initiatives, but also ensuring that we are getting participation from the identified stakeholders from our community engagement planning process, so that we can ensure that people who are impacted by the work that we are doing are being presented with opportunities to get involved.
Okay. You also stated in one of your slides that in the past we've really looked at numbers. Numbers are easy to understand, but now you're going to look at, if I remember correctly, you're going to look at people that you haven't been able to reach before. How are you going to report on that sort of thing?
That is harder to report on because it would necessitate that citizens self-identify as perhaps belonging to a marginalized group. What we can do is identify groups or individuals or stakeholders who we are trying to target and do our best to ensure that they are given opportunities to participate. Ultimately, it is difficult to measure. We would still look at overall participation levels, but as well try to ensure that those participants are representing the groups that were identified in the original community engagement plan.
I think I'd like to see more of that, and I'm just curious as to how it will be presented, because I get the feeling sometimes that we have a lot of people that get engaged, but they're the ones that are engaged in everything we do, and are we really hearing from different people, or are we just hearing from that 2,100 people that get involved with everything? And yet the masses still aren't involved. How do we measure that, or how will you report on that?
Through the chair, I think, again, the easier metric is to look at the number of participants, as you said, but we can't always identify the individuals who choose to fill out a survey in a way that's anonymous or show up for a public meeting without identifying themselves or what group or interest they represent. So we will work with staff to identify who those stakeholders are for their community engagement exercise and ensure that we're deploying appropriate tactics to try to reach those groups. We will look at participation levels and, where possible, try to identify that we have reached groups that are harder to reach, but it is a more subjective exercise.
Thank you.
Councillor Netsky?
I'm trying to understand where we're going to on this in terms of what we have right now. You're saying we're trying to improve on what we have. And I'm just trying to understand, like, what do we have? I mean, we do public notices in terms of legislative requirements, whether it's a zone change or public information meetings and stuff of that nature. It's all in newspapers and wherever else it has to go. And that's I understand that. I know we also have events, whether it's here, at City Hall, like New Year's Eve, Oktoberfest, and all that stuff. There's public notices on that. There's also Neighbors Day that we try to promote and getting everybody involved. We're not doing enough? Is this what this report tells us? Or is just you're trying to get everybody involved that a lot of people just don't want to get involved. They just want to they're happy with what they have. I mean, could you sort of elaborate on that? Help me out?
Through the chair, this is about recognizing that we do need a more consistent, coordinated approach across the corporation. So staff are, as you've pointed out, already doing lots of public consultation. There's been a variety of consultation methods deployed across the organization, and retaining the community engagement framework allows staff to recognize that the level of effort will vary depending on the nature of the work that they're doing. So the most basic level of engagement is to simply inform the public, and sometimes that's the most appropriate level of engagement. And at its greatest level, we would entrust citizens and really empower them in a great way. That decision has to be made as part of the community engagement plan. And previously, the application of that community engagement framework was fairly subjective. So the implementation of a policy is intended to provide staff with better guidelines to ensure that they're making those decisions about how we engage the public in a more consistent way.
Well, I always thought that you guys are doing a good job right now, and I didn't see any need for improvement. And now I see this report, so I was trying to make another step forward on this. I'm just wondering how much effort you need to keep going to get people involved. I mean, there are certain people who want to participate. They're very active in neighborhood associations, community groups, Compass Kitchener, whatever it is. They're diehards, and they sit on committees, a variety of the city has, and they're good, and other people just don't want to get involved. I mean, sometimes you have to look at the elections. I mean, we get 25 to 30% people voter turnout, and the other 70% couldn't care less. I mean, do you try to engage the 70%? Well, we've been doing that for years, and we're still no further ahead. Some people just don't want to get involved. Is that the group that you're trying to get at?
Through the chair, one of the recommendations coming out of the community engagement review was the creation of a special outreach strategy. So this is intended to recognize that for many of our citizens, they don't feel comfortable participating in a conventional way, and that there's work that we may need to do in order to build relationships in communities that may feel marginalized, to ensure that those people feel empowered to participate and feel that their voices are valued and should be part of the process. So we recognize that not everyone will choose to participate or get involved, but I think we have a responsibility to ensure that we do the work to eliminate barriers and provide a variety of methods for citizens to participate.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I always thought we were doing a good job on it, and I was wondering why we have to put an extra effort into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. One of the concerns that I've had in the past, and I see on 5-12, 4.6, techniques for engagement. The city will use the most appropriate techniques to ensure an efficient and effective process and create meaningful experience for the public. It seems that each department within the city can have very different ways of doing public engagement. Engineering has one way of presenting to the public, planning has another way, transportation has another way. Is this policy going to tighten all of that up and have the same? Because the most ineffective public engagement, in my opinion, is a number of boards lined up in a room, and you have groups of people standing, and every question that's asked at that particular board gets asked again and again and again. because people are moving through the whole process. So is this policy an effort to make it consistent all the way across?
Through the chair, the intention of the policy is to have greater consistency in terms of the process and the methods that we follow in developing our engagement campaigns, but recognizes that there is a need for customization of our tactics depending on the nature of the work that staff are doing. And what is suitable for the neighborhood strategy might not be appropriate for engineering work. So staff need to consider, essentially put that stakeholder, the citizen, first and have that person in mind and understand how they could participate in a way that's meaningful and design the engagement tactics to reflect what's an appropriate level of involvement for the citizen.
But the citizen often feels that it's a divide and conquer in those kind of scenarios, and that's what I hear all the time when I'm standing in those kind of public engagement opportunities. Whereas when I'm at something when transportation presents a traffic calming, they have the boards up, but then they always gather everyone together and give a rough general overview and allow the citizens to ask questions that often spin additional questions. And I think that's the best engagement because everybody hears the answer at the same time. There's no opportunity for misunderstanding, which has happened in other public consultation sessions I've been to. The other question I had, when you, Councillor Singh spoke about closing the loop, and that's in 4.9, reporting to the community on the results and the feedback. I know we have to have people's approval to contact them. Just by putting their name down does not necessarily always mean that they want to be contacted to understand the final solution. What other ways will we consider using to close the loop so that citizens feel like they've been heard?
Through the chair, some of the common methods that we would deploy right now would be reporting certainly to council, as Councillor Marsh pointed out. There's the community engagement section that explains how the engagement was reflected in the final product. We use social media to share information with the public. When we do any community engagement through our online platform, there is an outcome that's posted for each engagement initiative that would explain to the public how their feedback was incorporated into the work of staff. So we would look at how we engaged with the public and identify if there's other methods or tactics to reach out to staff, reach out to the public based on how we engaged them initially. And as well, I work closely with marketing and communications staff to identify communications tactics that we can use to reach out to the public.
So council would always be aware of how the community's engagement and their participation reflected in the decision that was made by staff. Because I think sometimes that's also a missing piece, is the council doesn't always get to know that because of this that we heard, and sometimes we do know because we're there and we hear them and we get a lot of emails. This is because of the public said this is why staff has changed their decision or reported, made their recommendation differently. You're writing, so I'm assuming you're thinking this is a little a new piece, an additional piece?
Through the chair, we are working to improve the way that we execute on community engagement plans. So one of the business plan items, there's several business plan items that will ultimately support this policy, including the creation of community engagement plans, resources, templates, and training for staff. And through that community engagement planning process, staff are asked to consider how they will close the loop with the public, how the final results of that engagement campaign will be shared. So we can absolutely take your feedback and look at how we can ensure that we're doing a solid job of sharing those results with the public.
One tiny, really quick question that ties into this, doing a better diagnosis of the location. So I think that's important. If the location is drawing our community members there because it's easy to get to, you know, there's no point in having a PIC miles and miles away from where the issue is happening, right? I think that's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions that we have for you. Thank you very much. So this has been moved by Councillor Fernandez. Councillor Ioannidis, you wanted to make comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. What I see here is, I think this is a pretty comprehensive, coordinated policy. I like seeing that we're exceeding the normal engagement, legislative engagement standards. I think that's rather important. I think this policy does show that we do care about what our citizens are asking of us what to do, and we do listen to them, and I think this is a great policy for that, so I definitely can stand behind this policy.
Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank staff for the work that they've put into this document, because I think it is a reflection on the fact that we've been evolving as an organization in terms of community engagement, and it's captured some of the best practices that we've learned from other municipalities. It's captured some of our own experiences in terms of what works in our community, and taken all of that and ultimately put it into a policy that's now going to guide us as an organization, with a commitment to our citizens around what they can expect from community engagement, and also a reminder to us internally within the organization, both at a staff and a council level, around the accountabilities that we have in terms of being a transparent organization and meeting our community's needs and expectations around engagement. I think the other thing, and this was mentioned by staff in the presentation by Ms. McDonald, is it also provides room for using different tools and tactics in different circumstances, because that really is important. You know, what works in a public input session around how to design a skateboard park, for example, is very different than what will work as a planning application is being considered, for example, for a new infill development next door, versus what kind of input we might get at a budget input session. And so it is important to have different approaches and different mechanisms, and I think this policy allows for that. I think one of the things, and I didn't ask this as a question, but I'm hoping is going to follow from this, and the slideshow, I think, gets us part of the way there, but is actually a communication document that actually talks about this new framework in very grassroots, easy to understand perspective for citizens, so that they know what we've approved and what are the standards we hold ourselves accountable to, and what they can expect as citizens. And that can then be posted on our website and shared through social media channels and so on going forward. But overall, this has been a great piece of work. It has been a while in coming, but that's a good thing, because it means we've made sure that it is a well thought out document that will serve our organization for many years going forward. So thank you very much.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm going to support this, but I really do see it as this is still a growing field and a changing field that's going to be affected by technology, I think, on a go-forward basis. This is definitely a step in the right direction. I'm happy to support it. But I do share a lot of the same concerns that were highlighted by Councillor Gazzola. What really worries me sometimes is that when this is supposed to inform our decision to make sure that we make the best possible decision. But we need to really consider the source of the data that's coming towards us. I'm going to be the first person to say more data is always better than less, but you really need to consider the source of that data. And my only fear in this going forward, especially for some of the bigger picture items, is that there's going to be some belief on behalf of the decision makers in the future that there's going to be some consensus of the community based on this community engagement. And that's not really the case. A lot of times you're going to hear from, as Councillor Gazzola mentioned, people that just are continually engaged with the community. And I think in a worse situation, you're going to hear from people, the special interest groups. So I think there's a real danger that you can end up making a decision based on a vocal minority. So that's something that we as council members need to take into account. I do have this, lofty vision at some point in the future where we can engage a set number of people for especially the larger decisions in some statistically representative way that will really help us give a better flavor of what the community wants. But I do agree with this, what we have before us, and I think it's a step in the right direction.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Seelock. I too am happy to support this. I'm a big fan of engagement because I think it gives us a really good sense of direction. And I think the most important thing is to increase engagement is to be able to show those who did engage that the results of that engagement and how we as a council use the information that they were part of to guide our decisions. I think the more that people know that their engagement was part of our decision, the more they'll be inclined to participate. Thanks.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. So it's always been really important to me to meet with the community, and to that end, I've always had a Meet Your Councillor night. And I know that many of us around the Horseshoe do those kind of things so that we can have an opportunity to speak with our residents, both in an informal setting, but also in a formal setting, whether it's in council chambers or around a public information session. I think that we have to be very clear that we have a policy, but we have to be nimble. We have to be flexible. And as I commented on the different divisions and the different ways that public information sessions are held, that inconsistency can create a sense of mistrust and sometimes misinformation, because if you don't happen to be standing at that particular board when the question that you asked and the time is up, and you don't get an opportunity to ask that question and you don't get the answer, then you feel as a resident that you're not engaged properly. So I would be really interested if there was a graphic, or not a graphic, a way that we could weigh the difference in how people engage in, let's say, a board kind of engagement session, or a conversation Q&A kind of session. It would be really interesting to see if the comments that staff receive from those citizens are more pro or more con. Because I think it puts staff at a bit of a deficit. If they're feeling that they're not able to share all of the information with all of the people that are there at the same time. I've seen consultants and staff sort of jockey positions so that they try to get answers to everybody, and that can be frustrating for them as well as the attendees at any engagement that we do. I think it's good to see that we've set out citizen roles and responsibilities as we have with council, and I think that makes it very clear if somebody is reading this policy that they know what we are expecting of the public to do, but also that we're willing to say these are what our expectations and our responsibilities are. That kind of information is good, because not that we want any finger pointing on any side, the public to us or us to the public. It does lay it out a little bit clearer. I think one of the things that I do want to say is that when the community attends these public information sessions, if they're not happy with what's happening, they are always welcome to come to a committee or a council to express their either support or their lack of support for a particular item moving forward that we as a council are making a decision. A public engagement process, no matter what it is or how it is not the final time for them to have a say. the final time for the public to have a say is at council, because that's when we make the decision. And I think it's really important. And I don't know that I saw any of that in this document, and maybe that's something that we should look at adding, so that the public is aware that that is always the opportunity for them. I'm glad to see that we've done some, I think, revisions that are positive, and I certainly do hear from my colleagues about the squeaky wheel, because in every situation there's always going to be people who are more vocal on a particular issue. We do have to take some of that weight. We have to weigh that in a little bit, I think, with what others may feel on a particular issue. So I'm happy to move this at the present time.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, thank you. I've always been very interested in public engagement. I think it goes hand in hand with transparency. I know it would be very difficult to ever vote against anything that deals with public engagement. I hope that going forward we are improving upon things, and I think we are. At any rate, it becomes a policy that people can refer to see that we're doing what we say we want to do. I really feel that's important, and I would love to see more and more public engagement. I look upon public engagement when our constituents are calling their councillor up for information, for assistance, and I've always tried to say I'm open for business on that 24/7, and I think that is what we need to do. So going forward, it's always an improvement. It's ironic, though, as I sit here and look at next Monday's special budget agenda, when it's an opportunity for the public to come and comment, and it says delegations, none at this time. So I'm wondering, are we being successful with our public engagement? And nonetheless, I will support what's before us today.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that I'll be supporting this as well. But I would qualify that. I don't think that anyone in their right mind, if they're running for office, would oppose any kind of public engagement. It's been my experience over the years that the type of meeting that is frequently held, as Councillor Fernandez said, is these board-on-board meetings, which quite frankly drive me crazy whenever I encounter them. I prefer people being put together in a room and allowed to ask questions. They can then ride upon each other's questions, and they can put more thought into whatever the subject is if they're listening to other people. I don't see that happening as people parade around the room and after a few minutes go home. So I would, if I had my way, I'd throw out the board meetings and encourage our staff to hold the other type of meeting. The other thing, by the way, I may be wrong, but I anticipate that those are held, the board meetings, because people don't like being shouted at. And yet when they're shouted at, you often get better communication on whatever the issue is. The other thing I would say is that it's been my experience in my ward, especially recently with so much happening downtown, where developers have started responding to calling public meetings of their own. I've got 3 lined up at the moment. And those meetings are being held alongside of our city public information meetings in certain circumstances. And they are great to attend, and it's great to see developers doing that. Now, people don't always agree with what they're being told by the person in charge of the development, but I think it's a great way to engage people, and I think we should do everything we can to encourage those extra public information meetings. But I will be supporting this, so I would thank staff for the report.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And through my question, I made a part comment about the importance of closing the loop. And I think for local government, anyways, public engagement and responsiveness is the cornerstone and absolutely expected by our citizens to be heard. But I think through aspects of public engagement, it can't be always just to hear, but also to engage and have a conversation. So I agree with some of the comments made that whenever public engagements are conducted, that there be a mechanism to have a more formal conversation where we can take in questions, answer those questions, rather than just relay information and expect certain information to be given back. But this is a good step forward. As I said earlier, it will continue to be a something that we have to improve upon as other technologies become available that make it easier for us to connect with our citizens. But for now, I think we are already doing a good job, and this is a continual improvement. But again, I think we have to make as much effort as possible to ensure that not only do we ask the right questions, but we help to provide answers and, more importantly, inform our citizens of the actions that are taken from their feedback.
Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you. Just very, very briefly, because I think there's a lot of good comments and feedback being made. I do want to caution us and remind us that different citizens respond to different approaches and techniques in different ways as well. And I think that's part of the reason why staff, depending on the particular issue, take a particular approach or a particular set of approaches around dealing with things. I know I have, over the years, participated in things where residents don't feel comfortable. I mean, we're all comfortable speaking in a group, but some people aren't comfortable standing up in front of a group and asking questions, and are more comfortable having a one-on-one with someone at a board. There is value, no doubt, in sharing that common information with everybody. And so often what works well is a presentation followed by one-on-ones that involve boards. So I think, again, that's the whole purpose behind this policy, is to look at the different tactics and apply them as they're most appropriate for the particular issue being considered.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I want to just add that I think this policy will help us to be smarter and more dynamic in how we engage residents. I understand some of the comments of our colleagues that we may be worried that we'll just continually be engaging the same couple dozen people. However, I have heard from many residents about various city initiatives that they heard about it after it was completed, and they didn't feel like the city did enough to make sure they were informed, or that the city had already made up their mind about something and then only just informed the citizens later. I think that because we are actually sincere about wanting to engage the residents in our decision making whenever possible, that this policy will take another step towards making sure residents understand we are genuine in our interest to have an engaged group of citizens that make the city as awesome as possible. And we will deter those who are apathetic about the city not wanting to engage. We're already doing a decent job, but we have the room to improve, and this engagement policy will hopefully help us move in that direction.
I will just make some final comments. For me, it's good for us to have this policy and definitely to work towards achieving everything that's outlined in this policy. For me, this policy outlines more around what the responsibilities are for people, what framework, and the when. When do we engage and what category it fits under. Not necessarily the how do we engage when it comes to the techniques. It doesn't speak to very many techniques. That is for us to continue to grow the toolkit that we have for community engagement. So if there is new technologies that can be added, if there are new best practices that can be added, they don't have to come into this policy. Those just come into the toolkit, and all of this outlines how we would do that and whose responsibility it would be to do that. And so for me, this is really important, but it doesn't get down to the crux of what a lot of people are talking about around the horseshoe, because it's not talking about the techniques. It's talking about the when and the how and the responsibilities. And it takes the corporation and it brings everyone together onto the same page, and it filters it all towards and the responsibility towards our community engagement consultant, which is Ms. McDonald. So I think it's a really important step that we're taking to streamline our community engagement and make sure that we're doing the best that we can moving forward. And so I will fully support this. With that, there are no more comments. It's been moved. All in favor? Recorded vote has been called. Sorry? That one's flashing too. Well, I voted for you. Okay. Press the green button. I got 2 votes today. I pushed the green button. Is that what you wanted? Okay. It's the power of sitting in this chair. Sometimes you get 2 votes. Mr. Mayor, if it comes up wrong, let me know. So that is carried. Oh, sorry. Those in favor, please stand. Those opposed? Carries. All right, we're going to move on to number 6, which is the noise exemption for Ever After Music Festival. Ms. McNeil's here to answer any questions, but doesn't have a presentation. So we will turn right to the delegation, and that would be Rob. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Welcome back.
It's our annual gathering, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for the time again. As usual, we are discussing the Ever After event. This year is scheduled for the second weekend of June, encompassing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I know the city staff sent forward some information. I hope you have all had the time to review it. What we're requesting this year is a little bit different than what was proposed by the city staff, in that we're looking for a 60 dB level at Residential Plain and a 9:30 time period for ending Sunday. The 9:30 is simply because of the programming issue around some of the key talent for that day. What I'd like to do, however, quickly, if I may, I'd like to applaud the city in engaging Novus to do a little bit of work and try to get a better understanding of what occurred in 2017. We experienced some interesting things in that event, but I'd also like to qualify the information within that report, and in particular in one section where we make reference to ambient noise levels in the neighborhoods. It's my understanding that in order to ascertain an accurate ambient noise level, it needs to be done over a greater or broader period of time. So although there is some information there that establishes the ambient noise levels at somewhere between 38 and 42 dBs, I'd like us all to qualify that in that it may very well be 43 or 44 or 45. And that's relevant simply because of the suggestion that a 15 dB level above that ambient noise level is almost like a critical level to respect. And I think that's how the city came up with the conclusion that 55 dBs would be an appropriate level at the residential plane. As well, there hasn't been a lot of emphasis put on what was identified in the report as an environmental anomaly, something called an inversion. And we see, again, I hope you're familiar with the report, but the primary problem occurred on June 4th, the Sunday, and in particular post 8 p.m., where there was an excess of, I believe, 75 complaints registered just in that time frame. The consultant did a fantastic job of identifying this environmental anomaly. Did not occur the year before, did not occur our first year, and hopefully we would have seen the last of it with respect to what we saw in 2017. But that needs to be recognized as a unique occurrence and one that we don't expect for 2018 and onward. However, as we've seen, it can occur. So some of the steps that we've taken, I've provided a little bit of documentation. One document that I provided is a letter from the City of Ottawa. That letter is addressed to our partner. We've partnered with the founders of Escapade DNA. And what is interesting in the letter is that most of the steps that are identified by the city official in Ottawa are steps that we are already undertaking collectively with stakeholders and the city officials. The points that we did not have in place in 2017, we are implementing in 2018, which has added a significant amount of expense to us, the promoters. We are introducing something called a Trinity Array. It's an innovative mode of communicating the sound to the audience in that it's completely flexible with respect to direction as to a real-time perspective, which is important to us. And as well, what's even more relevant is the subwoofer array that we are implementing. It's one that's designed to negate the sub effect by way of every third sub being inversely oriented so that we negate the phase circumstance that propagates the bass into the areas that we really don't want affected, and in this case, the residential areas. It's been proven extremely successful in Ottawa, and in Ottawa, it's a very unique circumstance in that their event is held in Lansdowne Park, literally 400 meters from residential communities. Here in Kitchener, I believe we are roughly 800 meters to 1,000 meters away from the nearest residential areas. And so we're confident that this technology format will help us. We are also implementing delay towers, something that we weren't able to do last year, but this year we are indeed engaging in that as well. And we believe that by closing Sunday at 9:30, we'll probably eliminate the majority of the issues. I think the community is offended to some degree by the fact that the following day is typically a work day and a school day in some cases, and as such, the 11 o'clock closure was an issue. So I think we've tried to mitigate those concerns.
If you could just wrap up, Rob.
Sorry?
Sorry, your 5 minutes is up, so if you just want to wrap up, please.
Okay, please. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yep, there's a couple. Councillor Fernandez?
Well, thanks, Rob. It's good to see you again. You really want to keep going with this festival. Kudos to the fact that you continually try to navigate some of the issues we've seen. The change in the times, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday was much later, was it not?
No, our normal time was last year was 1 to 11. all 3 days, Saturday and Sunday, and I believe it was 5 to 11 on the Friday night.
Okay, okay.
So what we're proposing is a Sunday change.
Okay.
Saturday remains 1 to 11, Sunday is where we are affecting the change.
Okay, I have 11 a.m. till 11 p.m.
No, 1 o'clock
1
in the
o'clock.
afternoon.
Okay, that's a change in the report then. You're asking for a change from the 55 dBA to 60?
Last year we had a 65 dBA level, and that appeared to be too high. It's important to note that when you drop the dB level 10 dBs, that has an effect of halving the sound that you actually perceive in your ear. So it's our belief that dropping 5 dBs would allow us to achieve that happy medium without compromising the actual event at the venue.
Okay. Is it possible for you to give us an example of what that difference would be?
Absolutely. 60 dBs is typically the sound level that you would experience in your living room having a normal conversation at a 3-foot range. 70 dBs is being in a public forum in a heavy conversing environment. 42 dBs is a public library.
Okay, all right. So you're changing it from what it was, which would have been in a heavy conversant environment. So I'm just thinking about the levee that was here yesterday, and that would have been good for you to have been here with the music and the people. Would have been interesting to have seen your comment on that. It was a little bit difficult for people to have conversation in that scenario. But these people are not interested in having a conversation. They want to listen to the music and they want to participate in the festival. So you're saying that 10 dBA is too much of a difference?
Yes, because the significance is felt at the venue more directly when we're trying to deal with noise a kilometer away or a kilometer and a half away. And so for us to be able to maintain 105 to 110 decibel level at the venue, at the front of house, what we call it, which is roughly 125 feet away from the main stage, we're able to maneuver that sound, especially with this new technology, in a way that we believe we can maintain comfortably a 60 dB level up to as far as 2,500 feet, which in effect brings us well within the range of the nearest residential area. 55 starts to challenge us and doesn't allow for some of the anomalies that might be encountered this year as well. Weather is always a strong influence here in Kitchener, so we're trying to accommodate that. If we were to try to understand even noise as a whole, with the previous discussions that the group was having, I was recording, and we hit spikes of 67 dBs. Our average in this room was roughly about 59 dBs. Okay. And that takes into account lows of 40 and highs of 67.
Of course. So one last question. Do you think that the change in dBAs will change the experience for the festival goer if they're standing not front of house, but say near the back?
Yeah, so what we've done to try to account for some of the changes in terms of lowering some of these levels, the repeaters or delay towers that will go into play roughly at 250 to 300 feet away from main stage will allow the attendees that are in the back to have a very, very good experience, while still allowing us the ability to control the sound. One of the issues, one of the main issues from a technical perspective, and not to bore any of you, there's two components to the sound. There's the sub, which sits on the ground, and that's typically what offends most people. That's what vibrates your windows. And then there's the array, and the array includes highs and medium frequencies. Having the ability to control that array from the sound technician's perspective at the time that the event is actually occurring will allow us to target more and direct into the crowd as opposed to trying to push across the crowd so that we reach a broader audience. And the most offensive, as I said, is the sub. The highs are also equally offensive. When you get into the extreme highs, it bothers people as well. So the ability to maneuver that will allow us to better control those two extremes, so that really what people will hear more of is the mids, which are less offensive to the human ear.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I have some questions of staff also, but just a couple of questions from you. I'm trying to consider the people that are attending. Of the people that are attending, how many of them are local and how many are from out of town? Just a rough percentage.
I can tell you quite specifically. Locally, as an example, last year we had 25% from the U.S. We had 5%, which we classify international, which is outside Canada and the U.S. And the balance were Canadian, with the region making up roughly 33%.
Okay, I just wanted to get it. So there are people there are neighbors that live here already.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the other question I had. I wondered what we're doing. What are the age groups of the people of your customers?
This particular event attracts a younger community. They range from 16 to 30. We've had attendees that are 35, 36, but the primary age group is, let's call it 21 to 26 as the most active.
Okay, so it's not young children.
Yeah, they're younger people.
Yeah,
but not
really young.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, in the first couple of years, were there other changes made? Like, I'm trying to understand. Last year, the decibels was 65. What about the previous year? What was the?
We didn't take the measurement in the same way last year, or the years prior. What we did is maintain a house level, and the house level was always at 110 dBs. So last year we were identifying at the residential areas what the measurement was, and that's where we set our limitation. As I said, the year before was phenomenal for us in terms of the lack of complaints, but I think we had much more ideal weather circumstances. That unusual anomaly is well documented in the report, and a lot of weight has to be, referenced to that particular issue.
Okay. In your discussion and presentation, you talked about Ottawa residents as being 400 meters away.
Correct.
Where your figures are 800 to 1,000.
Correct.
And then at one point you said 2,500 feet.
Yeah, 800 meters is roughly 2,400, okay. Just under 2,500 feet.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that's okay. Right. Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. Thanks, Rob, for coming in. I guess one of my questions is, and this is some of the feedback that I heard, not necessarily from residents in my ward, but from just in the community, and it's basically about the vibration. Is this new system going to help with that?
Absolutely.
In reducing the vibration?
Yeah, the line arrays won't have as dramatic an effect on the vibrations, but the orientation of the subs and the actual product that they will be placed on will address that tenfold. It's a phase issue. So what we're doing by turning every third sub in the opposite direction is negating what comes out of the side and the back. We want to control the front. We want that to propagate into the crowd. But really what causes the issues, again, if I'll reference the report, they do a great job of identifying where all the complaints occurred. The complaints actually occurred, if we were to look from an orientation perspective, being on the stage, to the right of the stage, almost perpendicular to it. And in that regard, it's called side spill. So we're accounting for the side spill with that orientation.
Okay. As far as your partners, I guess this is with Ali.
Yep.
Does the City of Ottawa do any similar restrictions on their event?
They do. They are afforded a 65 dB level. And as I said, they hold their event. Last year was the first time they held it in Lansdowne Park, so it was a very important issue for them to deal with. Again, it's an EDM event, so it's exactly the same format of music that we're dealing with. Previous to that, they held it at a raceway. So they were very comfortable, and the raceway is roughly the same proximity to residential as we are here in Kitchener. And they never had any issues there. Again, same maintenance of levels. What they did do, though, that isn't identified so directly in the letter, there was a strong campaign pre-event with respects to bringing awareness to the community, so that no one was taken off guard that weekend. We've suggested, in my conversations with several councillors, that we'd be happy to have a public forum. It's funny, you were just talking about that, where I would love to sit in a room and have the citizens come and engage in dialogue and yell at me if they like to yell at me, and give me the opportunity to respond with facts, and that way we can try to bridge some of the gap. My understanding is there's less than 120 people complaining. There might be more that are offended by it, but I'll gladly sit with whoever wants to speak to me about it.
Okay. So outside of what is being recommended by our bylaw staff, the only thing that you really have concerns with is the 55. You would prefer to have it 60.
Correct.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Madam Chair, a couple of questions for Rob. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
What's your connection between Novus, unless I'm missing something, and Escapade in Ottawa? What is the connection? Your partners?
There is no connection between the two. Novus was an organization, sound engineers, that were engaged to conduct a study by the City of Kitchener, with respects to our event in particular in 2017. Okay. So again, I applaud that effort. What we've referred to in Ottawa, because Ottawa is a very similar community in terms of even demographic, we thought that their input would create a little bit of comfort, or at least understanding as to how they viewed these events.
Why wasn't this system you're talking about now, why wasn't it used last year?
We had a different production company last year, and one that this system wasn't familiar to them. As well, there was a cost limitation. It was a new system, so we've had a year plus to actually understand and see the effects of the system in environments similar to the ones that we're proposing. And we've decided, since we're going to be here, we do intend to experience growth in the event, and that will allow us to spend a little bit more money with respects to mitigating some of these issues.
And that new system has not yet been used in Kitchener-Waterloo at other venues?
Not to my knowledge. Nowhere in Kitchener.
Okay. And one last question. On page 6-7 of the report, I believe, if I got it correct, you're saying the system will help, but will not eliminate complaints. Could you elaborate a little on that?
Absolutely. It's our experience that regardless of level, we'll always have an individual or two that will complain. We go back to the year prior, 2016. I think we had 5 complaints, 6 complaints. Ideal circumstances, well-controlled environment, and still there was complaints. I think the very nature of human behavior is to complain when you're having to deal with a consistent 3-day period of listening to the same thing.
But to be fair to people, surely a lot of people complain when their houses are shaking from bass noise.
Absolutely.
That's been my experience.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And that's really why we created further emphasis in the sub-array setup.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Yunetsky.
The crowds that you have that attend the festival, are they there for the whole day? Like if you're on a Saturday, they're there from when the shows start right through 10 hours of it?
Yes, we have an in-only policy. In other words, once you enter the event, if you exit, you're prohibited from coming back in. So typically, from that critical period that we call on Saturdays and Sundays in particular, from let's call it 3 o'clock onward, you have the majority of the attendees there and there for the duration.
Okay. You indicated that in terms of the decibel level readings that by the stage you want to keep it at a level of 110 decibels, sort of stage, I forgot the exact phrase you used.
Yes, well, so we measure the decibel levels from the front of house. That's where the sound technician actually resides. So we maintain that level somewhere between 105 and 110. Back in my day of concerts, rock concerts, the objective for every band was to hit 140. Typically, musicians like to be able to range up to 120. We've always maintained a position 110 is our limit.
Yeah, the nature of rock bands, basically, the louder the better.
The louder the better.
It's their philosophy, right?
Correct.
The crowds that are there, and you're saying if you've got that level of 105 to 110, and the crowd's there all day, and that's where they hang around is the stage, don't they go deaf after a while?
Well, if we were to observe some of the guidelines that even the Ministry of Environment sets with respect to noise levels, it's believed that 140 dBs creates permanent damage. Sustained levels of 80 dBs to 105 over a period of 8 hours creates damage. But really, in my opinion, I've never been much of a concert goer because I'm irritated by the sounds at that level. But that's really what they want. That their experience is one to feel the music, both internally and acoustically. And so in any circumstance where there's entertainment of that kind, whether it's EDM, hip-hop, rock, the levels expected for quality are in that 105 to 110 range.
And I can understand that, and I think that, as you said, you hit an age group of 21 to 26, I think you mentioned something like that, and there, of course, their hearing is fine until they leave the concert. I think they won't realize it after a while.
Correct.
On Sundays, you say you have your main bands that come up. That's sort of the climax of the weekend. Is that correct, more or less?
Obviously our key bands, our key attractions, our key entertainers occur the last two of every day, so to speak. So on the Sunday, they typically play for about an hour and a half. So the last 3 hours of the Sunday are key people that we spend more money on. Saturday, same thing. And so they are, in particular, more sensitive to their ability to play at a level that they feel comfortable with. And moreover, the attendees are really there for them. If we were to think of them as headliners, when you attend a normal concert of any kind, you're really there for the last people that are up there. So you want the quality to be appreciated then.
And I understand that. And the issue that you also had based on previous years is the Sunday evening going on to the later hours, and of course the complaints that you've received, school the next day, work for those who have to go to work and all that. What about if you curtailed, I mean, now here the recommendation is to, instead of stop it at 11 on Sunday night, is down to 9 o'clock. You want 9:30, I gather. Correct. Why not stop it at 6 o'clock and have that main events in an afternoon when, you know, you shorten the day to some degree. Maybe you start earlier in the day, but you finish at 6, and then you've got nothing to worry about in the evening in terms of noise complaints. But you still have your headliners right in the middle of the day, and then people can still go home if they're crowds from wherever outside the city. It gives them time to get home.
Well, there's two reasons. One is a business reason. Already now, removing an hour and a half in a key area affects certain revenue streams that we hope to derive from the event itself so that we have longevity. But moreover, the experience of an event like this, a festival, always leads up to that evening and night experience, in particular with EDM. The headliner, keep in mind, these are DJs, so they're not up there with a guitar or anything of that nature. So a lot of the experience on top of sound is light. If you were to bring them on at 4 or 5 or 6 on a June day, the light effect would be almost mitigated completely. So what we're looking at is having one primary act on the Sunday to close it off, so that the light experience for the attendees can be enjoyed, because it's a very visual experience, the entire EDM platform. And now, even from some of our other events that we're dealing with rock, a lot of the rock bands are instituting these amazing light shows to go with their sound programs. So whenever you push into the daytime hours, you negate the real effect of the lighting experience.
And I can understand your question on the light, but when I look at your...
Councillor Yunetsky, your time is
yeah,
up.
I'm just trying to answer his question in terms of the light issue that you point out. I mean, you're dealing at June 9th and 10th, which is the longest day of the year is almost coming up, and the sun's not setting till 9:30. So what kind of light show can you have?
Well, you will have a light show, because typically we find that the hours of sunset range in those times from 9 to 9:25, but that light that occurs just pre-darkness is equally a light that, let's say, allow an attendee to enjoy an experience with respects to lasers and these other features from the actual entertainment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. So the decibel, what was the decibel level last year for the last act? Was it 110 or from the soundstage, or was it higher?
No, it was 110. We maintained 110 limit. We never exceeded that because we control that level. Mm-hmm. So we would create cutouts. And at one point last year, the last act did cut out when they tried to push beyond that. There's really two sound technicians. There's one that operates for the act, and then there's our master sound technician. So we set that limit very rigidly. But what occurred last year, is in particular on the Sunday in and around the last act, was that weather anomaly. Like, it was really something never seen before.
Okay. And so 2 years ago, it was smooth sailing, more or less. But then 3 years ago was when people from more than, I believe, 10 kilometers away were hearing it. Maybe not at 65 decibels, but we were feeling it and hearing it and seeing the windows shake in some cases. So can you help me understand what your whether or not the 55 decibel level might not be, why is it not possible for you to accept 55 decibels, or why are you requesting 60 instead of 55?
I think the 55 from the 65, as I said, that 10 decibel difference is actually you're halving the perception of sound.
Okay.
And so I think that'll be enormously impactful. But I think doing 60 will achieve the same thing. We need to remember, that, again, the majority of the complaints occurred on the Sunday night. Mm-hmm. So going to an earlier time will already address those concerns. Mm-hmm. But then we have an issue where you mentioned 3 years ago, our stage orientation was a problem. And we identified that. So we changed the positioning of the stage. And so year 2, we noticed that ideal weather, right orientation of stage, outputs just as high, if not higher than year 1, and minimal complaints. Okay. But in terms of compromising the experience for the attendee, and in particular the artists that are there as well, doing something around the 55 is going to make it very, very challenging. Our sound engineers that we onboard ourselves have identified that the range will be somewhere between 45 to 60 dBs. They didn't indicate anything above 60, and when they say that, it's not that you're sustaining a 60 decibel level, that's your spike, your pulse.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, last year for the final act, when the complaints started rolling in, what was the response from your sound technicians? Did they turn it down?
We did. Whenever Gloria did a great job with her team of being out in the field, whenever it was identified that it pushed beyond or even close to the 65, she notified us. We had a 65 limit, but we did attempt to tweak it, even a couple of dBs, because, again, as I said, a 2 or 3 decibel level decrease at the house has enormous effect outside. Okay. So we were able to control that.
Okay. Now, do you provide complimentary or do you sell earplugs to the attendees?
There's vendors that actually do. They probably sell very little, to be honest with you. The experience is such that they want to hear the sound. But I would beg for all of you to come, and I'll tell you why. There's certain areas in the venue where you really feel the impact of the music and the sound. Literally shifting, 20, 30 feet in a direction or other where there's other activities, the sound becomes totally mitigated, and it becomes extremely comfortable.
Thank you for the invitation. But I've been to concerts where the sound quality was tremendous, and I'm not a big EDM concert goer, but and I admit that. But at the same time, if you've got all these high quality speakers that are going to provide a really good quality sound, what I don't understand is why it needs to be so darn loud when the quality of the experience with the light show and the sound quality could still be excellent for your attendees at a lower decibel level.
Well, there's two factors that play into the reasons why the levels have to be as high as they are. Number one, we are compared to other events. Every other event in the world, not just in Canada, carries 110 to 120 decibel level at the house with respect to performance. So it would be like having heavy metal enthusiasts go to an orchestra, and clearly they're not going to get the same type of appreciation for what they hear. They want to hear a certain type of output at that event, and our attendees want to hear that output. They're not there to hear sound levels that are diminished. And keep in mind, it's not that there's a static 110. Those are pulses. So if we were to think about an average, the average that's experienced in our concert environment is somewhere between 95 overall. And again, these are averages that are established over specific periods of time.
Okay.
It's just the pulse.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Galloway-Seelock, and thanks for coming in. I just wanted to, follow up first on the sound system that you're proposing. Is this? I remember when we had the meeting with the folks from Guelph. They talked about the kind of system that exists in Chicago, and that's a more permanent setup and not possible. Is this Trinity system and the Auralex stuff with the subsystem really designed to mimic that on a more temporary basis?
Pretty much so. I mean, what we're trying to achieve is control of the sound in real time. The Auralex product is one that you can't play with. It's going to absorb, it's going to do the things that we need it to do from a sub perspective. But the control of the array is designed to give us more of that Chicago feel that was discussed with the consultants. It's not anywhere near as good as that because, it's one sound being traversed across a broader space, whereas in Chicago you have points where the speakers are all above, which is ideal. But it does a fantastic job of giving us that mirrored effect.
Okay. And in terms of the information that's here in the letter from Ottawa, have you shared that with our staff?
We were able to garner that letter just before the holiday, so I haven't had the time to circulate it to Gloria and staff.
Okay, because I have some questions for staff then as a result of that, which I'll ask later. So thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to say that I'm very impressed with the way that you've responded to our concerns. And I want to make sure that your fan base has a great experience. And, we also have to take in the needs of our residents. And there was that anomaly last year with the inversion. So I just want to know if we would grant you your wish here, the 60 dB and the 930, is that something you would rigidly uphold. You know, if we have another inversion, God forbid, and we get the hundreds of complaints that we had, would you respond to that and say, okay, we'll turn it down so your kids can get the sleep and you can get the sleep to go to work on Monday?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons for going with the Trinity system in particular is so that we can control things on a minute-to-minute basis. So if we do notice some unusual circumstances where sound are carrying in areas that we do not intend, to be receiving the sound, we can adjust accordingly. This year will be an even more impactful year with respect to our relationship with City Bylaw and the officers that will be patrolling the neighborhoods, so that we can react to their concerns and to the residents' concerns on a real-time basis. Unfortunately, in previous years, once you set your rig, you can't move it. So it just leaves us handcuffed. The only solution is levels, levels, levels. Here we have multiple solutions.
Okay, great. It'd be great to have that perfect balance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that's all the questions that we have for you. The rest are for questions of our staff.
Thank you.
All right. Councillor Griswold, you're first.
Yes, a couple of questions of staff last year. Do we know what the decibel counts are in the area where people are complaining?
Ms. Rignall?
Through the chair, yes, we did take readings at any of the properties where we received specific complaints. We also did proactive readings. So during what Rob referred to as the temperature inversion last year, we did have readings that were hitting 62 to 64 decibels in some areas in the city. And those were...
And you have equipment that goes to these areas after somebody's complained and test it?
Correct. We have a sound level meter that our staff are certified to use.
Okay. Of the 100 or so complaints, well, first, the year before, is it true that we only had 4 or 5 complaints?
Through the chair, the previous year in 2016, we had a total of 7 complaints.
7?
Yeah.
And then last year we had 100 plus?
Correct.
And were they throughout the 3 nights, or were they on one night, or?
Last year we had, on the Friday night, we had 14 complaints. Several of those came in towards the end of the evening when the concert was almost ending, so we really didn't have an opportunity to be able to get some sound levels. Saturday night we had none. And then on none.
Not 9,
yeah.
None.
And then on the Sunday night we had over 100.
On the Sunday night?
Yes.
And what was the time period?
Majority of those came in. We had a few that came in prior to 8 o'clock, but majority of the complaints came in from 8 o'clock on.
Okay. Were you familiar with what the delegate wants, the 60 decibel and the 930? Did you discuss that in your negotiations?
Through the chair, we did have several meetings with both the Novus, who's the company that did the report for us, as well as with Beyond Oz and some of the area councillors. And we had come up with what we felt was a fair balance between what we heard from residents as well as what had been identified by Novus. I did have an opportunity to speak with Rob on Friday, and he had advised me that he was going to be bringing something to council that was a little bit different than what I was proposing.
How do you, from what you've heard now, how do you feel with the 60 and the 930?
Through the chair, the reason we set the 55, and I'm going to say I'm not an expert in this by any means, which is why we had sought to work with Novus. They had felt that dropping at the 10 decibels would reduce the sound level of what people were hearing at their homes by about half, which was the advice we went with. In terms of how that will play out, I'm really not sure. It is a bit of a trial and error to see what works and what won't work. The weather, as we've mentioned, plays a huge part in this, which unfortunately we're not able to determine what that weather will look like until only a few days before the event takes place.
Are you satisfied, though, that there was this weather problem last year that was different than a normal year?
Through the chair, yes, I am satisfied with that. Novus did, they do have meteorologists on staff, and they did quite a bit of work in regards to that and did show us that there was a significant inversion that happened, which then what it does is it bends the sound waves back down to the ground and propagates them out, which is what seemed to happen.
Okay. Is our normal figure 65 throughout the city? Is that a normal acceptance?
Through the chair, that has been the normal decibel level that we've asked for previously, and that generally has worked with most concerts that we've had until last year.
Okay, one last one. With the festivals, music that we have in Victoria Park, what is the 65 level, the accepted level there also for the neighborhood?
Through the chair, we have not put limits around anything that happens in Victoria Park previously. So we've never done sound level measurements there, and generally those noise exemptions go through special events as one noise exemption for all of those events that take place.
Do we have any experience, though, with complaints in the neighborhood?
We get very few complaints with those events that happen in Victoria Park. I think Blues, a couple years ago, we had a couple complaints, but we really get nominal complaints.
Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Sealock. Gloria, I guess my questions is, have you seen this document before? Have you heard of this Trinity? I know you're not an expert, but has this ever been brought up by the group Novus or whatever that we had hired, that there's types of systems out there that can reduce the sound from carrying?
Through the chair, I have not seen that document. I haven't had an opportunity to look at it. When we had met with the consultant, there were some suggestions made in terms of different types of equipment that were available. So there was some discussion around that.
Okay, so if you had a thorough look through this with our consultant and it looked favorably, would the difference in decibel levels, would that be a more of a comfort if we switched that to 60?
Through the chair, I would certainly take any comments that they had based on their expertise into consideration.
Okay. I guess my other question is, with the applicant, with the event organizers, in the history that they've been in the city and working with in this community, how have they been working with you and your staff?
Through the chair, I have absolutely no complaints in terms of working with the promoters here. I think we've seen the last couple of years they've made significant changes each year when we've asked them to work with us in order to address some of the concerns we've had. So they have been trying to work with us.
Okay. Madam Chair, when the time is appropriate, I just want to add an amendment to the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. May?
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to clarify the recommendation of Novus. Novus provided us with a range of potential measurements, and so Ms. McNeil picked the one that's before you. In that, it said that we will still get complaints. We are still going to get noise complaints, and so I think you need to understand that whether you set it at 55 or 60, it's just a question of how many complaints is council prepared to accept. Because it is a range. So they also gave us a number that they felt would get us 0 noise complaints. Staff didn't feel that was appropriate, and so we've picked something in the middle. And really, it's council's decision as to how many complaints you're prepared to accept.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ioannidis started asking essentially where I was going with my one question. of Ms. McNeil. But I guess I just want to take it a little further in the sense that, if through talking with Novus or through City of Ottawa or others, we can actually determine that this sound system configuration would reduce the impact because it's better at pointing the sound in terms of where we want it to go. Is that information that we think we can probably get between now and council next Monday? Or actually, I guess we have 3 weeks in this instance, so that gives us a little more time. If the numbers are favorable, do you think that would likely change your recommendation on it?
Through the chair, I think we certainly have some time within the 3 weeks that I could reach out to Novus and have them review the document and provide some feedback on it, and then I would be happy to relay that back to council. In terms of whether or not I would be satisfied with it, I'm happy to support whatever council believes would be a fair decibel level for this festival.
No, absolutely, and I think, we've been, I think those of us who have been engaged in dialogue with the promoter and Novus and so on, I think the effort has continually been made to look for ways to be compromising and try to find a mechanism that works here. Okay, those are all the questions. I'll have some comments later.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking through the report and seeing, again, a reflection on 100+ complaints from our past experience. Now, that's considerable, especially when we are very reactionary on just a few complaints. 100 is significant in comparison. The report outlines that normal range in a neighborhood surrounding is 38 to 43 decibels. That would be in a daytime, I'm assuming, or?
Through the chair, no, that would be in the evening. So those ambient sound levels were taken in the evening. That would be at the same time that the concert would have been operating.
Okay, so I probably didn't look at the report clearly, so my fault. But it jumped from 38 to 43, which is a normal, to even 55. Is that still a significant increase to ambient noise levels at that consideration, from 38 normal to a 55? Because right now we're talking about throwing numbers as 55 adequate, could 60 be something that we can be comfortable with? And I'm assessing, even from a norm of a 38 to 43 jump to a 55, is that already a significant noise increase?
Through the chair, generally anything that's between 5 to 15 decibels, there will be an audible change for people. They'll be able to hear it, and you may expect some complaints, but there wouldn't be the sizable number of complaints that we received last year. So we've tried to stay between that 5 to 15 in what we've proposed. Again, anticipating we're still going to receive some complaints, but hopefully not over 100. So I think, going above that, you're starting to risk it a little bit.
And I'm glad you're outlining that, because we have to be considerate of that. The whole effort of outlining these requirements is to simply reduce the number of complaints that we have gotten. In coming to terms, of course, we consulted with Novus Environmental. Have we consulted with other cities as well? We're seeing concerts where restrictions have been put. And through Mr. May, he said, coming to a 55 decibel is more of a medium. Is that a reflection on what others have done as well, or how, beyond our consultation with Novus Environmental, how are we coming to that point?
Through the chair, we had previously done some consultation with other municipalities, and that's where we came up with the 65 dBA that we've been using. We had also consulted with a different acoustical engineering company for advice on that, and that seems to be the acceptable norm for concert-type music. to be heard in a residential zone. So us reducing it to the 55 was a direct result of the background work that Novus did both on the weather conditions as well as the number of complaints that we had. And that's how we came to that number based off of what the lower ambient noise levels are in that neighborhood at night, and then factoring in all those other factors such as the weather and the complaints.
Okay. When looking at this report and seeing that we're asked to provide a noise exemption for Ever After Music Festival, I still see this report as precedent-setting also. My assumption, I don't know if I'm incorrect, would be that we would use some similar restrictions as outlined in this report for the applicant, would be something similar in other parts of the city for music festivals or concerts?
Through the chair, potentially, that could be up to council to decide whether or not they thought that was appropriate. Again, we've done this based off of what happened previously, not necessarily with somebody coming in. I think, as Rob had mentioned too, the biggest challenge with this music festival is the bass and the noise fatigue. It's 3 days in for people to sit and listen to that. So a lot of that, there's complaints being generated because people are 3 days in and don't want to hear it anymore. So I don't know that you could necessarily always apply the same standards to every concert event.
In consultation with the applicant, did we consider some days a higher like louder noise allowance as opposed to others? So like you said, it's not consecutive 3 days of excessive loud noise, say in between on Saturday. Was that ever even discussed?
Through the chair, we did not have that discussion with having the Saturday potentially be louder than the Sunday. I know there was some discussion around maybe going later on the Saturday, but not in regards to the level of noise.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Yanetsky.
We have this report before us that's being considered with a number of conditions and a recommendation, and the applicant is here in support, requesting a couple of modifications as well. And it was indicated that there's 120 complainants from last year. How many of those people were notified of this report in this meeting, and have they been invited to come to provide their opinions on this today?
Throughout the chair, the report is published publicly, and I do know that there have been at least 2 media outlets that have done an article on this report coming to council today. In terms of notifying people, I know it's up to the promoter to notify and do advertising for the event, and they've done that in the past. But for today's event, we don't specifically send out invitations to people. We have published the report like we normally would, and there have been some articles written.
And I know that. I know you publish this on the website, and there was an article in the paper over the weekend about it, and the record as well. So I know there's been public involvement, but I was just wondering whether those 120 people, you've said you got the names and who the complainants were and where they live, whether they were invited, and you've answered the question. The answer was no. Thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Madam Chair, some quick factual questions to Ms. McNeil. First of all, can we establish how many complaints it is? I heard as high as 130. The councillor is using 120. I've heard 112. How many complaints were there?
Through the chair, there was over 100 that came into the police alone, and then we received about 30 over email the following day.
Okay, 130. And the police, how many responses did we have to the concert by police and emergency services, paramedics, ambulances?
Through the chair, I wouldn't be able to provide you any information on that. I do know that as part of the project team, police and ambulance are part of that, and they are retained by Beyond Oz in order to be there, and they do have extra pay duty officers assigned depending on what the police think is an appropriate number for the crowd levels.
Sorry, didn't I see one of your reports with 342 in it?
I believe that was in the article in the newspaper.
And where did that come from?
I'm not sure.
But you got to remember, we're noise exemption, not some of the other things you're considering.
Did the police and paramedics stop responding at some point because of the volume?
Through the chair, I'm not sure. I do know that they were on site. They did have dedicated staff on site for the entire event.
And do we have, and it's unfair to ask you that question, we have no idea the cost of those emergency services.
That's not relevant to what we're dealing with here, Councillor
It's
Etherington.
relevant to what I need for my decision.
We're dealing with noise exemption, so that's what we have to base our decision on.
Would there, to your knowledge, after dealing with the police, talking to the police and emergency services, were there any, I presume there were no deaths, were there any overdoses that you know about?
That is, again, not something that we can ask staff to answer. We are dealing with a noise exemption here. We are not, at the end of the day, they have the opportunity to go ahead and run this festival if they want to. They just wouldn't comply with our noise bylaw, and they would be fined. And so we can't stop this festival. We can give them an exemption, or we can't. So outside of that, we can't ask staff to answer those questions.
I think someone should ask those questions. Ms. McNeil, has there been any other event in your experience from a noise level where there has been more than 100 complaints?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge, no.
No. And this coming festival, if it goes ahead, will the promoters be paying for police and emergency services as well as the bylaw officer that they are paying $1,200 for?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that there is a cost associated to the police and paramedics.
And they pay the bylaw?
Yes,
yeah,
correct. They
costs.
do pay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Just one question. I want to make sure I understand, because there's been some questions about the sound system and how it will vary. When we're looking at the decibel limits, whether it's 55 or 60 or whatever committee decides upon, those are measured at the property wherever we get the complaints that come in, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So whether the sound system is, well, for lack of better terminology, if it's a fantastic sound system or a terrible sound system, would there be a difference at the property if it's 60 decibels or 55 decibels in terms of their perception?
Through the chair, to be honest, I'm not quite sure. I'm not familiar with what it is they're proposing or what the impacts would be on how that could reduce the impact of what's being heard in the residential area. So that would be something that I think we would be going back to Novus and asking for some clarification on.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola, is yours a comment? Councillor Ioannidis, yours is a comment? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
I just wanted to know roughly what section of our community did this affect. Now, I represent Ward 3, and I didn't hear any comments. So where would the bulk of these comments come from? How big an area is affected?
Through the chair, the biggest area that was impacted last year was the Lackner Woods area, which was in Councillor Schneider's ward, as well as Breslau area.
Okay, so the two areas. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, that's all the questions we have. So, Councillor Ioannidis, do you want to bring forward your motion or
Yes.
the motion plus your amendment?
Thank you, Councillor Galloway-Seelock, Chair Galloway-Seelock. So, based on this new information that the the organizer has provided. I guess my recommendation would be to refer staff's recommendation in order for staff to investigate the Trinity system and whether or not there's benefits or cons to it, to whenever that next meeting is in 3 weeks time. And the reason why I'm making that suggestion is because I do realize that there should be a balance, but I do, again, myself, I really struggle with creating any types of restrictions when it comes to music events when we're, you know, it's a thing that we're looking at trying to animate our community with and become a music city. So, and based on the organizer's cooperation and willingness to cooperate and has the good working relationship with staff and also with staff's good work in this, I think we owe it to our community to at least investigate this system and see whether or not it can be beneficial in whatever aspect it may be.
So if I hear you correctly, you are looking to defer a decision, but give direction to have staff to either further investigate themselves or through the consultant that we've used the system. And I think there was one other point that was made with regards to the difference between 55 and 60. And just, okay. Okay, that will be the motion. There's a number of comments now popping up. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, just very quickly, Madam Chair. I can appreciate where Councillor Ioannidis is going with this. I'm comfortable with seeing the report and the information laid out, and appreciate that they've gone to lengths in coming to requirements that are in the medium in addressing, what would lessen the amount of calls and complaints that we're getting from our citizens, while at the same time, from what I'm hearing, it would still allow for events such as this to be successful. And they didn't come to these conditions or opinions on their own. They've sought out expert opinion, and they're basing these recommendations according to those. We have to be cognizant of the extensive amount of complaints we've received in the past, and I think we have to be answerable to those complaints. And if we carry on in a similar manner or allow additional flexibilities, I think we're not taking those concerns seriously enough. We gave a direction to staff to go out, seek opinion, and they've done so. They've done a good job with this report, and I think we should place more weight on what's before us now and proceed with the recommendations outlined with the noise exemption as sought. I would prefer voting on it and supporting the recommendation, and rather than continue to defer and looking for ways to continue to increase the envelope when we know what the issue and the problem is. And from what I see, I think the recommendations will help to solve those concerns as we've received in the past.
Councillor Fernandez.
I'm quite impressed with Oz Productions and the way that they have really listened to us around the chambers. They continue to come here and try and work well. We heard from Ms. McNeil that they have a good working relationship. I see Minto Schneider and Mr. Bingaman both sitting in the gallery, which tells me that they recognize the economic importance of these kind of festivals. We want to make sure that our city invites people from all ages, all genres that they would enjoy, all sports activities that they would enjoy. I think it speaks very well that they have changed from 11 p.m. to, what Ms. McNeil recommended is 9 p.m. And I do understand Rob's comments around the lighting display and effects that really are part of that final act. I wouldn't be averse to changing it to 9:30, but I will support what Councillor Ioannidis is saying in terms of his deferral until council. But I think that no matter what is done, we're going to get complaints. This is a kind of music that a certain population loves. They're passionate about it. They come from all over to enjoy it. And, you know, not negating their complaints. I'm not negating them whatsoever, because I think that's our job here at council, is to hear our residents and listen to them. But we've come to a reasonable compromise. I think a 2-hour change, or even if it's an hour and a half change, can be a significant change in the experience for that festival. I want to see them continue to be successful, and I think they've been trying very valiantly to figure out how to be successful within the constraints and within the trying to respect the community at large. You were hit with a weather anomaly that may happen again this year. It may not. It may happen in 2 years. And so I appreciate you trying to adjust the performance time, looking into a system that, from everything I've read, is quite complex and will be more responsive to complaints as they come in, and the fact that you've built a good working relationship with our bylaw staff. I look forward to approving this in 2 weeks with the additional suggestions that you've made.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I'm not sure what direction I'm going in. I would like to. It sounds to me like this might be deferred, and I don't think that's a bad idea. I would like to get a little more information on the complaints that we had for the full 3-year period. I'd like to try to understand the complaints, because I too believe that they're no matter what you do, you're going to get some kind of complaints. I don't think we can ever go to that extreme route where you do everything so that you don't get complaints. Then if you do that, I think you lose on other factors. So I would, and I also like the idea, I don't know, that the applicant here said they wouldn't mind meeting with the people and having the people have an opportunity to discuss this issue. I have found in the area that I represent, when we have some tough situations coming down the road with changes that need to be made, permanent changes, when the developer or the applicants sit and meet with the people and have good discussions, that you deal with a lot of issues up front rather than after the fact. So it would be interesting to hear what the people, and it's especially in the area that's affected. So I'm inclined to go along with what the applicant is asking for here. We're not going all the way. I think they're prepared to go part of the way, and I've been impressed with the way not only the applicant but our staff are working very closely together dealing with this issue. So it's fortunate here now we've got 2 weeks, 2 weeks at least, that I know I can do a little more homework, and I would like to see more detail on the complaints as to when they happen, what kind of complaints, where they came from. We don't seem to totally understand where they came in through the police, what were they about, and whatnot.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Sealock. I actually didn't have any questions because I've myself and Councillor Schneider, our wards are most affected. We met several times with bylaw staff, and the mayor was included as well leading up to this. I came prepared to support the recommendation. The new sound system is new information that I was happy to read about. I look forward to hearing what staff has to say in terms of the impacts of that. I do want to be really clear as well, because I've had some people that were on the more negative side of these sorts of events, questioning the merits of it, and it has been mentioned, but there's one huge part, and that is I think we really need to continue to try and provide some recreation and entertainment for younger people, because there isn't a surplus of that in our community for people that are I think 15 to 21, 22, that range. But the other big piece of this that I think gets overlooked a lot is the economic spin-off from this is huge. It's been pegged in the many millions of dollars for that really benefits local restaurants and hotels and transit and all these sorts of industries that that can certainly use the help, and I think it's our duty to make sure that we do everything we can. So having said that, I do want to add my voice to compliments to Rob and your group, because I really believe you guys have done everything you possibly can to try and meet the restrictions we're trying to place upon you through new technology, et cetera. And I'm confident that we'll come to a compromise. On the same token, I do maintain that we need to find a middle ground where it is a one weekend a year thing that we're looking at, but even then, if we can try and find a way that when people have their windows and doors closed, that they're minimally affected by this as well.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. I will be supporting Councillor Ioannidis' amendment. I think it's new information that we really do need to consider. It's always been about balance for me, and I did receive a lot of emails last year. It took days to get through them all. But the meetings that we've had, I've been so impressed with the genuine concern and reaction that we've gotten to our concerns. They want this to be a great event. Bingamans want it to be a great event. I know for our city, we do want to be known as a music city. That's a goal of mine as well. I want to see great festivals. This is a world recognized festival. And I want more of that. And the best of this genre are coming here. And I know there's plans to expand beyond this genre to have different genres of music where other segments of our citizenry will be enjoying as well. I do want to consider this new information. I will say that when I was answering the emails that I got last year, there was a high number of the emails that did acknowledge the economic benefit to the city and the vibrancy that it adds to our city as well. So in there, it was just talking about that, but wanting the balance, because we don't want our youngest citizens to lose sleep. They want to perform in school the next day. Parents want to perform at work the next day, and I believe that we've got a really good foundation here to find that balance. And I think the extra information will really go a long way into making sure that the experience for the fan base forever after is happy, and they're going to come back and they're going to get a favorable impression of our city. But we'll also be able to make sure that those who live in our neighborhoods can have that expectation of a nice night in their backyard as well.
Mayor Urbanovic.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. I will support the deferral today, because I think that additional information for staff to review that was provided, to dialogue with Ottawa and or our consultants and others would be helpful. I'd like to understand, what it would likely mean for us, and also what it will likely mean on the other, the other side of the boundary, in terms of the noise that was carrying into the township of Woolwich as well, because there were significant concerns expressed by the mayor and township council there, and in fact that's where some of the noise complaints came from. I'm not sure if they're within those numbers or if those are over and above the 130, but I think when that comes back in 3 weeks, we can have that information. I know I certainly spent from around 9:30 till a little past 11 that Sunday night driving around and trying to better understand the issues in different parts of the east side of the city, as well as in the township. Listen, I think it's incredibly important for us to make sure we provide a wide variety of entertainment options for people of all ages and all different types of genres in our community. If we want to create a place where people of all ages want to live, work, and play, we need to ensure we're open to creating an environment that encourages that. At the same time, While we do that, we need to work with partners like Oz and Bingamans and others to make sure it's done in a way that also respects additional neighborhoods, or sort of respects residential neighborhoods, so that we don't end up having conflict happening. As some have noted, there will always be a few complaints, and I think we're all prepared for that, because a rock music lover doesn't like country, a country person doesn't like electronic music, and so on. There will always be some of that. As Mark can tell you, I mean, there was a time many years ago when I represented that area, and 1 year it was people complaining about the noise from the rock concerts and the music and the swearing. And the next year it was people complaining because there was a gospel music festival going on there and they didn't like that and they were complaining about that. So there will always be some of that. I think what we're trying to do is manage that. I think the additional information, particularly if it can start mimicking some of the things that we learned about the Chicago sound system, could help us. In terms of dealing with some of the concerns going forward, and that coupled with no more weather abnormalities, should I think help us go a long way towards being able to move this forward in a positive way.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Madam Chair, just very quickly. We just spent some time talking about community engagement. Along that line, I support the proposal for the deferral, because I'm hoping that will give some of the complainants, some of the people who had to put up with this noise, the opportunity to come here in 3 weeks and give us an earful on why they complained. So give people a chance to speak out.
Councillor Marsh.
I am happy to support the deferral today. I am leaning towards the staff recommendation for a 9 p.m. end time, but would be more, based on what we hear after staff have a chance to look at the additional information, I would be more inclined to be more flexible on the decibel level in the neighborhoods. I have heard positive feedback from young adults that have attended the event in the past, and I do actually worry about the potential for long-term hearing loss in the what did you say? But and if I do have a chance to check out the event, I will wear earplugs, however, and I think it's exciting to have an event like this that seems to be so popular and attended from people from all over North America and beyond. So I think that we need to be supportive of this event, but we also need to make sure that people are able to function the next day when they're going to school or going to work. And so I do think the earlier end time is a key part of the equation.
Councillor Yunitsky.
Last year when we dealt with this issue, I had concerns regarding decibel level, the hours of operation, and didn't support it, and then we still had all those complaints. And here we are a year later trying to address them and do some modifications to it. And I'm still not happy with where we're going to it. The modifications requested by the applicant I really can't support, just not going in the right direction, and I'm not prepared to support that. I feel sorry for the residents. I really feel sorry because they'll be subjected to this noise again, no matter what decibel level you finally arrive at, if it's going to be supported in the end. I'm disappointed that there's no public engagement. We talk about engagement with the community, and there's nothing. The ball was thrown to the owner's court to deal with with those property owners. I see nothing happening. I know there's no legislation required to do a public circulation on this, but we still could have did notice in the paper saying we're having this meeting dealing with the noise issue of this event, and we had concerns last year. Public should be invited. No public engagement on that. Sunday evening concerns, again, that was one of the big issues from last year. I know the weather was a factor in terms of those issues, but that's why I asked the question about maybe curtailing it at 6 o'clock and doing the event there. Now, I received the answers from the owners, from the organizers, and I can understand where they're coming from, but I still feel that the residents are going to be very, very much affected. So unfortunately, based on those criteria, I can't support it.
All right, I think that leaves just me left to make a quick comment. I'm pleased to see that this is going to take a little bit of time and pause so that we can get a little bit more information. For me, I've watched the progression of this event, and while I think it's great from an economic development perspective in our community, each year something's changing to try and make it better, which is a good thing, but on the other hand, we can't keep being that trial and error. And so I think Rob's recognized the fact that this is kind of the year that we have to make or break within our community. And I'm hoping that technology will work the way it should, and that the odds aren't against you with regards to the weather anomaly, because that obviously was not in your favor last year. I can understand why we are not doing a community engagement, a full-on piece for this. We would have to do it for pretty much every noise exemption we would do then. But it does give an opportunity with the 3 weeks for people to come forward. And Councillor Yanetsky, I think it's kind of interesting that you're promoting community engagement at this piece when you were the sole person who voted against it, voted against the community engagement policy just before this item. And so while I do strongly support community engagement, I think with this respect that staff are doing what they can, and we have on ownership to make sure that we touch the people that it's who've had issues with it over the course of time, and ask them to come out and speak their piece. Or one of the things we can decide to do in the coming times is Rob's already agreed to meet with the community, so that can be something that we could put contingent on the noise exemption in a few weeks' time too. With that, the motion is to defer this, recorded votes being asked, to defer this to investigate the new system and the difference between the 55 and 60 dBAs, and to see what's that? That's okay. I know Councillor Zoll has asked for some information with regards to complaints over the last 3 years, as well as look at the applicant to meet with the people. So with that information, the deferral is on the floor. Recorded vote has been called. Okay. Those in favor? Those opposed? And that carries. With that concludes Community Infrastructure Services Committee. Thank you very much.